everybody. I am joined here today by Don Irvine, who is the Director of Research at the American Conservative Values Fund, the first of its kind actively managed ETF that boycotts various companies for their liberal positions. So, Don, I'm really excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate this.
So, Don, I guess my first question for you is that as the Director of Political Research there, and that is the political aspect is what really separates this ETF from all the others, in that it is a outspokenly conservative fund, not conservative in the investing sense, in that like you are trying to minimize risk, but in the sense that you are trying to give your clients or people who purchase the ETF the opportunity to invest with their conscience and not invest in companies that may be too woke or that they think violate their social conscience. So I suppose my question for you is like really simple. And first, like, since starting the fund, I believe late last year, I should say ETF rather, which companies have you boycotted and removed from the index, and why?
Well, I mean, I think they're now, I think we're up to 28 companies, so I'm not going to list them all, but, we started off, with most of those actually were off the initial get-go when we launched the ETF. And that was, kind of the usual suspects for conservatives, political conservatives, Facebook, Google, those types of things, Apple. So there was a lot of tech companies that got the heave-ho from the beginning, but there are media companies in there as well. We had discussed initially, I think when I first met with Bill, about the media side of things, and we knew how liberal the media was. So publicly held media companies, the bigger ones, were also not going to be included in the ETFs in the portfolio, and so it has grown from there. And we're constantly looking for other companies that kind of reach that point of saying like, okay, that's it. This is the last straw where, we can no longer, with any good conscience, invest money in that company and then add it to the boycott list.
I see. You mentioned all media companies are boycotted. How about News Corp?
Well, I'm just saying, from the liberal perspective, I mean, we start off with the easier targets, something like the New York Times, or Disney and Comcast, taking the bigger ones there. With News Corp, obviously, it's a little bit different. I mean, the alignment of News Corp owning, Fox News and things like that makes that a little bit different. If for some reason they wind up, kind of going the other way, they'll obviously be taken a very close look at in that regard. But the bigger offenders are already out of the portfolio.
Okay, so let's say that I'm a conservative leading American. I don't like this woke stuff with all these, companies virtue signaling and doing who knows what, teaching critical race theory to their employees and such. Why would I want to not invest in, let's say, technology companies or fast-moving media companies that may be doing these things because these companies are oftentimes the ones that are growing really fast, right? And if I'm investing my own money, I mean, in theory, all I should care about is how can I maximize my returns? Why would I sacrifice some potential returns just because these companies might be a little woke, and I don't like their politics, but life is life. You're not going to agree on everything. What would be your answer to this person?
Well, I think, in this, like any conservative, I mean, the way the ETF was designed was that so that it would hopefully, mimic as much of kind of the S&P 500, the broader market as possible. We knew going in that to match the S&P 500 was going to be, it's going to be hard, because if we're going to take out these fast, growing technology companies that have been dominating for quite a while, then that was already going to give a little bit of a laggard, type of a performance there, but not really by all that much, I think, in the long run. And I think we're really appealing to everybody's conscience. Is like, we're going to do the best job we can of giving you the best return, but also trying to tell you at the same point in time that these companies, for whatever reason, that in terms of whether or not they've gone super woke or they've had some other issues there that are antithetical to politically conservative beliefs, you can rest a little bit easier at night knowing that at least your portfolio is performing pretty well, and that you're not supporting the Nikes of the world or the Disneys of the world, things that you kind of see a lot of times in the news with all these liberal woke policies. So there's always going to me personally, there'll always be a little bit of a trade-off there, but I think that is quite minimal versus someone who may have tried to do something, say a concentrated portfolio, and doing that, which makes it, I think, much more risky. So I think we have also kind of evened out the risk by taking this approach.
Okay, just so I understand, and for our listeners here too, but a concentrated portfolio in this case would be that you would start out by picking certain companies to invest in. For example, companies that, let's say, are conservative or moderate, definitely not woke. That might really limit the list of companies and the potential universe. Instead, you are taking basically the whole S&P 500, all the large cap stocks out there, and then just plucking out individual companies from there instead. And that, in theory, then shouldn't hurt the returns that much because you still have most of the market in the portfolio. Did I understand that correctly?
Right. So we're watching these things. We're watching the news on a daily basis, looking for things that kind of throw up a red flag for companies that may qualify for the next removal from the portfolio or boycott or whatever you want to call it.
I see. Now, do you have? I guess I'm a little curious. I think there's something around 30 million under management right now.
That's 26 and a half, I think, right now.
But 26 and a half. Okay, I overestimated, but around 27 million investors. Do you ever hear from your investors? And do they give you advice, and they see something on the news and they say, hey, I'm outraged, you should boycott this stock, or why aren't you boycotting this? Does that happen to you at all?
That hasn't happened yet to my knowledge. One of the things that's built into the website that we're going to work a little bit harder on now that the fund has grown so much within this first year is that trying to make a little bit more of that participatory effort here on the part of those that are invested in it. Send them to the website saying, look, you can kind of give us some guidance. It doesn't mean we're going to follow that. If if you're outraged about this company, we'll take that under advisement. If there's enough people that say, downvote whatever company is in the portfolio, like a Microsoft or whatever, or Berkshire Hathaway or whatever, then if we find a good reason to remove it, then we will remove it. So I think this is going to be an interesting experiment, really, if we can try to get the investors of the ETF to come back and say, okay, we've taken step one, we put our money into the ETF. Some will be probably more vocal than others, but I think this is still a learning curve with some people because the fund, the ETF is still so new.
I see. Yeah, and you mentioned that it is a little bit of an experiment, right? Because as I mentioned in the intro, this is a first of its kind fund, and there's on the flip side, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this in general, because there's been a huge explosion in so-called ESG investing. ESG standing for environmental, social, and
governance, I think.
Governance, yes, good, yeah, good corporate governance. Basically, though, in practice, that generally seems to mean that the definition is a little fuzzy, but it generally, from what I read about ESG guidelines and metrics that are being used to track how, are you performing in a certain fashion? These are usually, we could broadly say they're pretty liberal guideposts. That being said, taken at face value, environmental, social, governance, well, social, for example, or governance, that's not inherently a left-leaning term, nor is environmental for that matter. You can have a conservative outlook on that as well. But it is my suspicion, just anecdotally, that all ESG investing funds and the whole industry is just more or less geared toward more left-leaning causes and activities within these companies. I'm curious if you agree, disagree with that assessment.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I wholeheartely agree with that. I think that we've seen that. I mean, from the get-go when these funds were started, and I think they before ESG became kind of the little watchword, the catchphrase for all of that, was kind of a socially, what was that, socially conscious, I think was the first terminology of how they were classified, and now it's gone, it's kind of graduated to this ESG world. But yeah, no, I mean, when you do look at those guideposts, you're right. I mean, they tend to lean left, and they are kind of broad, and these ESG funds, they don't necessarily, I think when you look at some of them, they don't necessarily follow true ESG principles. I mean, all the way through. Some, there's stories out there now where some funds have rebranded themselves as ESG funds to catch the ESG train, to get people to buy into it, but they were never established as ESG funds to begin with. They've actually kind of flipped a little bit, and they're probably going to have to adjust the portfolio a little bit. But I think they're pulling the wool over a lot of people's eyes in terms of, are they really, doing what people think they're supposed to be doing, or are they just trying to say it's a marketing gimmick? And I do think a lot of times nowadays that the ESG, the explosion of funds on this, has been more marketing than actual real world, activity in terms of results. But they have kind of pushed companies, because there's so many of them out there, that's probably what helps kind of push them into this kind of woke world, is that there's a lot of money invested in this. And if the BlackRocks of the world are controlling huge swaths of this, you have then, and they're voting those shares, that's a lot of influence on corporate CEOs in terms of what their policies are going to be.
I'm glad you brought up BlackRock, because that was going to be my second point to discuss, because for the uninitiated, BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager. I believe they own something like $4 or $5 trillion in equities around the world, which means that they are basically the largest or one of the largest shareholders in virtually every publicly listed company in the world. And as a shareholder, and usually a significant shareholder, they actually have rights, and effectively they get to influence company policies for better or for worse. Recently, in 2020, Larry Fink, the head of Blackstone, emailed or sent a letter to every CEO of all these thousands and thousands and thousands of companies which BlackRock is an investor in, mandating that as part of their investing, as part of the company's new operating goals, it's not enough to increase profitability, which has been usually the desired metric, but also to meet a variety of these ESG guidelines. So in a way, they are putting their thumb on the scale now to all these companies' management, saying, we are watching you, we are a significant shareholder, you better start complying, and we will be tracking you to see if you're complying against various ESG metrics. And I think that's what's really causing a lot of these ripple effects throughout the industry. It's one thing for companies to think that, well, I'm woke, and I'm not that woke. I'm a CEO of a company, but it might help with our HR and our hiring practices if we say that we're socially responsible, yada, yada, yada. But that has absolutely zero effect on any of our internal decision making, because who cares? We're here to make a profit. But now that dynamic seems to be really changing with all these asset managers and all this money flowing into ESG causes or flowing out of ones that are not complying in the future. So it sounds like, Don, that American Conservative Values Fund is, first of all, completely removed from all of that. It shouldn't ever be confused with ESG. That's what it sounds like, right? Okay. So I'm curious if you view in the grand scheme of things, I know you guys just started, but sometime in the future, would it be possible that ACV will be able to command some similar influence on these companies, kind of from the opposite direction, as to what Larry Fink and all the others are doing on the ESG side of the train?
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, if the fund is able to, ETF is able to continue to grow and gain some more, get more assets under management, I think then it becomes a bigger influence. There are, in the investing world, there's certain benchmarks before, brokers will, be able to put you on the platform and things like that, and then give it, and buy it for their clients and things like that. So, we're getting to those stages, those initial stages where we're going to get on more platforms, therefore grow the ETF. As that happens, we're well behind something like BlackRock, and that'd be pretty hard to catch up with that. But at the same point in time, I think that that's something for us to keep in mind as we do that, is that if we get a little bit more influence, we can be a counterweight to some of this, because it has been very much one-sided up to this point in time.
It really has, and that's why I'm impressed by what you guys are doing, because this is a critique I often have about conservatives in America, or people who, let's just say, aren't woke, put it mildly. They can be classically liberal or something, but there's a lot of complaining that happens all the time. People go on Facebook outraged, or go to Twitter and say how they hate that all these corporations, Hollywood, and non-corporate entities such as universities and academia, what have you, are controlled by the left. Okay, that's fair. And that could be that's a reasonable complaint to have. But I've been hearing this complaint for a long time now, and I'm sure you have too. And it seems like if you're going to complain so much, why don't you put your money where your mouth is if you really care? If you're not a person of the left, or you're not woke, at least the people who are on the left seem to be making real strides, and they are really investing with their conscience, or what they view as good. So I'm just wondering if this kind of this plays into your philosophy of at ACV, in terms of trying to nudge conservatives or non-woke people to say, hey guys, quit complaining, do something about it, invest with us, or probably anywhere else for that matter, if you really care about these issues.
Right, and I think with political conservatives, through during my career, in dealing with a lot of these people and things like this in various organizations, it's just that what they're looking for is some kind of vehicle or some kind of organization to get behind and support. And so ACBF has really, basically, that's what we are now, is that we are now the avenue, the vehicle that you can use to kind of take this and put your money where your mouth is, as you said. Before, it's people have been buying mutual funds, they've been buying ETFs, they've been buying individual stocks and whatnot, and as we started at the beginning in terms of performance and all these issues. But there hasn't really been a concerted effort to try to gather politically conservative investors and put them into a vehicle that says, this now will match your beliefs as much as possible. That now, we are now aligning the two things. We're aligning your political beliefs with your investing philosophy, and those two things will then have greater influence down the line, rather than having a bunch of disparate people buying into different things, and buying shares of this company, that company. We're now be able to combine all these people, say, okay, everybody join us, invest with us, we will help become your voice.
I see. And also the thing is that you mentioned people would be individually picking stocks to boycott, invest in, not invest in. That's a lot of work, right? Most people are not professional stock pickers, and they don't have time to go through that work. So I like their analogy about ACV being a vehicle where you can have trusted people such as yourself and others doing the research, and with actual financial experience, which ACV has, right, in terms of the founders and everybody managing it. That this would be an opportunity for you to almost passively invest with your values. And to piggyback off of my earlier point about conservatives who complain often a lot about, let's say, the state of big corporations in America, but they don't really do anything about it, at least with their own money. I think a fair response has been, well, I mean, what, I live in this world, I have to invest somewhere. I don't have any other options. Like I put in the S&P 500 and that's all I can do, right? But now it seems like, okay, there isn't as much of an excuse anymore because now there is a viable alternative. So that's great to see, I suppose. Yeah. So in terms of just switching gears real quickly, what is your what kind of feedback have you been receiving from I don't want to say just the street, but in terms of like money managers, people who would recommend their clients to buy these ETFs, and all the institutions, and maybe even some like larger investors? In general, what kind of feedback have you been receiving so far as you've been, pitching ACV and talking about your vision?
Well, it's been pretty positive overall in terms of what's been going on out there. As we have talked to people that are in the, that are RIAs or whatever, and then other investors, they're very excited about this. That they can offer this, not only for themselves but to their clients. That's something that will, that's been needed for a long time and just hasn't been out there. I think there are other funds that have tried to capture things like, I think there's this MAGA fund of some sort, and it's been out for a number of years and it's got about 10 million in assets, but it just basically sits there. But I think they were trying to capture kind of the Trump train type of thing, but they really didn't have a guiding principle or any real solid philosophy, investment philosophy, and so they don't grow. Here we actually are saying we're going to do things. We're going to help you pick these things out, and we're watching this on an active basis. We're doing this thing, and so the reaction has been, from my point of view, overwhelmingly positive. It's like I said, something that a lot of people said has been long needed.
And if a conservative or a non-woke person or somebody who's just interested, or even a liberal who would want to short the ETF, which is possible, how would they be able to do this?
Well, I mean, to invest in, all you need to do really is to go ahead and either contact your broker, your advisor, or if you have your own online trading account, just go ahead and just go ahead and buy the ETF, the ACVF ETF, and it's out there. As ETFs are a great vehicle for investments because unlike mutual funds, which only trade once a day, ETFs are active. They're traded throughout the day, so you have a chance to buy it at any time at a price that you would even desire. So it's a great opportunity to do that, and you help the fund grow, you help the movement grow really in the long run as a result.
So it's available. Like, let's say you have your layman investor, you have a Robinhood account or something like that. You're just able to go and type in ACVF, and you can trade, buy as many shares as you want,
right?
Or short if you're liberal.
Correct.
All right, great. Don, this has been a really great introductory conversation. I would love to have you on again. We can talk more in depth. I'd love to dive especially into some of the companies that you have boycotted so far, and some that I'm sure you probably will in the near future. Who knows? But regardless, it's been truly a pleasure having you on today with us at Marion West.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.